Live presented by Miller Lite. Casey Phillips here with senior writer and editor Scott Smith. And we are going to take your questions. If you're not already watching on the Facebook page, you can head on over there, leave your questions for us in the comment section. While we give people a chance to do that, I figured we'd start with just some of your takeaways from OTAs so far, the one that we had yesterday, and today's practice is a few minutes away still. So what we learned from yesterday and the days since our last show, and then also some of the media availability. I know Bruce talked yesterday, Anthony Nelson, Ryan Griffin. What were some of your takeaways?
Well, the Ryan Griffin part is interesting because he's one of the few veterans who's participating. Most of the others are participating in their own workouts with Tom Brady. And it's interesting. He has pretty good logic for it because he says when it comes to the preseason, these young guys are probably the guys he's going to be playing with. When they get into those preseason games, Tom Brady plays with the starters if he plays much at all. And Blaine Gabbert could be the next one in, Kyle Trask. So Ryan Griffin is right that he's probably going to be throwing to these young guys that are on the back end of the depth chart right now. They're trying to work their way up it, of course. So he wants to build that rapport with them. And you've seen him do that in previous years. He's been really good at that. He's been very good in the preseason. And, it's interesting also that somebody asked him during his media availability, when you look at the quarterback situation for the Buccaneers, you have Tom Brady, who's obviously the starter. You have Kyle Trask, it'd be very, very unusual to draft a quarterback in the second round and then he doesn't make the roster. So let's assume he's on the roster. It would also be very unusual for any team to carry 4 quarterbacks these days. So if you have 3, it certainly seems like Blaine Gabbert and Ryan Griffin would be battling for that probably the second guy, but one of the 3. And Bruce Arians kind of pushed back against the notion that Ryan Griffin is the odd man out in that picture. But Ryan did say that if the way it worked out was one of the, maybe him or one of the veterans ends up on the practice squad, that he's open to that as well. Just some way to be here helping the team.
Okay. And looking at what Bruce said as well, what were some of the takeaways from him and some of the things that he addressed in his media yesterday?
Well, I know he'd like to have a few more guys there. Every coach would probably like to have the whole team there, although he's made it very clear that even if Tom Brady and many of the starters were there, they wouldn't be practicing much. He would still be devoting almost all the time to the young guys. But there's probably a couple guys he'd like to see in there. But, again, these are voluntary, and that's what they are. And, next week we have the mandatory mini camp, and he'll get to work with everybody. But right now, coaches across the league just have to work with whatever players are showing up for these workouts.
Yeah, and Giovanni Bernard was the only running back at practice yesterday, which is kind of fun for us to get a chance to see him since he is one of the new additions. What do you feel like his role could be and what they hope for him?
Well, yeah, he got a lot of action and he looks pretty good, and he's obviously a very natural pass catcher. I think he's 3rd in the league among running backs in pass catches. Pass catches is a weird way to say that, in receptions since he came into the league over the last 8 years. So, and he looks very much the part. And you start to figure out how that running back, that depth chart, the touches, the receptions and the handoffs, how that's going to be divvied up when you also have Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette and Keyshawn Vaughn. But Ryan Griffin, for one, said he thinks that Giovanni Bernard is going to have a big role in this offense and is going to catch a ton of passes, and that Tom Brady's going to love him. So, obviously you look at him as an analog to James White, who Tom Brady threw to so much while in New England in recent years before coming to Tampa. And it's just, I think he can do that. I think Giovanni Bernard still has a lot left and can do that. It's just, how are they going to split up all the snaps between those running backs has yet to be determined. It'll be interesting to see. But like I said, Ryan Griffin, for one, thinks he's going to do a lot.
And I know Bruce also talked about Jaden Mickens sort of mentoring Jaden Darden. And I wanted to hear your thoughts on the two of them and what, he could offer in that mentoring area and what it means in terms of those two guys. Are they the ones directly in competition with each other for a roster spot, and how you see that shaking out?
Yeah, it certainly looks that way. I mean, the Buccaneers are so loaded at wide receiver that you can count down to 6 without having anybody that seems like a bubble guy. And you usually carry 6. Sometimes we go up to 7. We did that for a little while last year. But it would seem unusual to devote 2 spots to receivers who, at least this year, their primary thing would probably be in the return game, which is probably what Jaden Mickens would be. It's what he was last year. And it's probably what Jaelon Darden would be if he makes the roster. And most 4th-round picks do make the roster. So I think they probably have some ideas for Jaelon in the offense. But I doubt he'd have a huge role early on, given all the other receivers that we have to get the ball to. So yeah, I could see those two guys being in direct competition. So it is kind of an interesting dynamic when Jaden is out there one-on-one while other receivers are doing other things, sort of teaching Jaelon little tricks of the trade in the NFL, because there are differences to the rules between college and the NFL and little nuances. Like the reason why Coach Arians was talking about that was because somebody asked him about it, because this was taking place right in front of where all of us in the media group were standing. I mean, it was close enough we could even hear what they were saying. And as an example, one thing that Jaden was teaching Jaelon was that rule about if you're on a kickoff, if you're fielding a kickoff and you put 1 foot out of bounds and you field the ball, even if it's in bounds, that's a penalty on the kicking team for the ball going out of bounds. It's kind of an obscure rule that not everybody knows. And Jaden was making sure that Jaelon knew that. That was just one of a lot of different scenarios he was going through at the time.
And of course, they had to make it confusing on all of us with Jaelon and Jaden. And as we try to talk about this, it's just this, we're going to screw this up a million times, I'm sure. All right. Bobby asked, with OJ Howard coming back healthy, do you think the team will implement more 2 tight end sets?
Well, they already did up it some last year. And, there's only so far they're going to go with that, because the Bucs, like most teams, almost every team in the NFL, their primary package, the one they use most often, is 11, which is 3 receivers. And with the receivers we have, you can understand why they would want to get that on the field a lot. But yeah, last year, I don't remember the exact totals, but from 2019 to 2020, it went up somewhere like we were in 12, which is 2 tight ends personnel, 19 or 20%. In 2019, it went up to more like 24, 25% last year. So with Rob Gronkowski arriving, obviously, that became a more common personnel package for us. And yeah, I do think when you have Rob Gronkowski and OJ Howard as a possible pairing, and Rob and Cam Brate and OJ and Cam Brate, there's a lot of reason to want to get those 2 guys on the field as well. So yeah, I could see it. I don't think it would go up a whole lot, but it could go up a little bit perhaps.
I know that another group that was a little thin in the workout yesterday was inside linebacker. It was basically just Grant Stewart and KJ Britt holding down the fort there. What have you seen from the 2 of them? And I mean, we know obviously inside linebacker, one of the most secure positions in terms of starters, but then we also talked about it was one that didn't have just tons of depth in terms of numbers of guys. So where do you see them keeping how many of those guys? How did the 2 of them look so far? How quickly are they picking things up, and what that position group could end up looking like?
Yeah, one of the reasons why that group is thin is there seems to be a bunch of guys who them and their wives are having babies right now. There's at least 2 or 3 guys out for that reason, including a linebacker we signed not long ago named Joe Jones. So hopefully that's going well for all those couples. But yeah, it was just the 2 rookies, and there's no contact. There's not a lot of 11 on 11, so there's not a ton that you can tell. I guess the most important thing is that Bruce Arians said, from the rookie minicamp to these OTAs, and then from week 1 to week 2, both of those guys, Britt and Stewart, are really doing a good job of retaining, and so they're able to build on what they did the week before, rather than having to go back and continue installing that. So that's made Coach happy. I think when it comes to KJ Britt, we're not really going to see the true greatness to his game until there's more hitting, because that guy's a hitter. First and foremost, and you can't really do that right now. So we'll see that maybe in August and September.
Yeah, I always feel so bad for the defensive guys trying to make the team right now, and they're just so hindered with all the rules with contact and everything. Wide receivers can still go out there and make these great catches and look all fancy, and then so many of your defensive guys, they're just having to be like, oh, yep, I would have gotten you. Yeah.
They get the occasional interception, and that's the big splash play that everybody remembers.
Yes, that's very true. Richard asked, how's the competition for the 4th tight end spot between Hudson and McElroy going, and who do you think has the edge?
Well, I think Hudson has the edge. I did see Cody make a couple of nice catches yesterday. I just think that the coaches really like Tanner Hudson. I think if there wasn't so much depth, if we didn't have Gronkowski and Howard and Brate, that they would have already had him on the field a lot more. So I just think he's ahead of Cody on the depth chart. That is obviously a place where a guy could make a move. Cody could make a move. So keep an eye on that one, but I would put Tanner ahead right now.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us on this edition of Buccaneers Insider Live, presented by Miller Lite. Thanks for all those great questions, and we will be back here next week.